As Christmas draws near, people around the world are beginning to wait in joyful anticipation for the one who will bring peace on earth and joy to their hearts. Santa Claus. Oh, and Jesus too, of course. Mildly mixed up priorities aside, Christians for centuries have known that the modern-day Santa Claus finds his origins in St. Nicholas, and that celebrating his generosity and sacrifice in this time is not at odds with celebrating the birth of Jesus. And yet, if we compare the actual St. Nicholas with the one of modern society, there are quite a few major differences and some less than Christian traditions associated with him. How did we get from a 4th century Greek saint to a jolly Arctic dweller with 8 magical reindeer? And should Christians really have anything to do with him? This is Catholicism in Focus. A simple reading of history may connect our modern understanding of Santa Claus to the Dutch celebration of Saint Nick, Sinterklaas. The Dutch have long revered a man with a white beard and red bishop's hat who generously served the poor and cared for children. Which sounds a lot like our modern Santa. Unfortunately, it's a bit more complicated than that. While Sinterklaas was certainly a major inspiration for our modern figure, literally giving him his most famous name, our figure has a lot of different names, and he didn't always even wear red. The image we have today of this jolly, white-bearded, red suit-wearing man dates back to 1931, and owes itself in large part to the Coca-Cola Company. While the company wasn't the first to depict Santa in red to match its marketing, as is the popular misconception, its ads in the 1930s did serve to cement this image as the definitive depiction of Santa. In reality, the first to depict Santa as we imagine him today, a large, jolly man in red fur, was the political cartoonist Thomas Nast in 1881. Prior to that, as strange and as wrong as it may sound, Santa was sometimes depicted in orange, but most of the time in green, and wasn't even a human. In the first definitive source for modern Santa lore, the classic 1823 poem The Night Before Christmas, originally titled A Visit from St. Nicholas, we find much of what we've come to know about the jolly figure. The hanging of stockings, a sleigh filled with toys, flying through the air led by 8 magical reindeer, and a round-bellied St. Nicholas going down chimneys to drop off presents. What is a little less familiar, however, is that he is depicted in green, rides in a miniature sleigh, and is actually an elf, which I guess explains how he fit down the chimneys. It had nothing to do with magic, he was just tiny. He also wasn't the nicest figure either. Just a few years prior, in 1809, Washington Irving referred to St. Nicholas in his book A History of New York as everything from a rascal with a blue 3-cornered hat, red waistcoat, and yellow stockings, to a man wearing a broad-brimmed hat and a huge pair of Flemish trunk hose. The reason for such discrepancy is because the Santa Claus we have today is the result of various European traditions that were blended together when immigrants interacted in the New World. At the forefront, we have St. Nicholas himself. As a real human being, he wore red as a bishop, gave gifts to the poor, and is even said to have thrown coins through a window once, landing into hanging stockings. There is no doubt that his life and memory influenced the modern image of Santa. But there is also no doubt that other figures, like England's Father Christmas, had a say as well. Depicted as the personification of Christmas cheer, Father Christmas encouraged revelry and was concerned mostly with food and drink. Dating back to the 5th or 6th century, King Winter, as he was called, was a pagan figure associated with the winter solstice and the coming of spring. He is dressed in a large green robe and wore a wreath of holly around his head. With the arrival of the Vikings in the 8th century came another tradition into the mix, that of the Norse god Odin. He was a deity from the frozen north who had an army of elves, rode a horse with 8 legs, and sent out 2 ravens to keep track of who was good and who was bad. Children would leave their boots by the fireplace filled with food for the horse, and Odin would leave them presents. A story that sounds awfully familiar. There's also the German tradition of Christkindl, or Christkringle, translated as Christ Child, created by Martin Luther as a way to move away from any reverence to saints. This sprite-like child depicted with angel wings is meant to represent the coming of the child Jesus, and is said to bring presents to children that are good and do not spot her. And who could forget Nissa, a garden gnome-like figure from Nordic folklore that came during the Yuletide festivities to deliver presents via a goat-drawn sleigh. He had no tolerance for laziness or rudeness, and despite his small size, he had enormous strength, meaning that he was said to punish farmers who didn't take care of their animals with pranks or even violence. In each of these figures, there is a piece of the modern Santa Claus, traditions handed down by Catholics, Protestants, and pagans, mixed together to create the ultimate marketer's dream, a jolly, principled, generous old figure who can be used to sell just about anything you want. Despite his many religious origins, the Santa Claus of today is really more of a symbol of American capitalism than anything else. And in this way, it seems that he has become the perfect image of the Christmas that many people celebrate today. A mix of generosity and frivolity. One who wants us to be nice and get what we want, but also to party like there's no tomorrow. You can clearly see how Christianity founded this character, but also how paganism has had its say as well. While I don't have any problem with Christians taking part in the Santa Claus traditions of our society, I think that he should be a reminder to us of how the solemn, holy feast of the Nativity of Jesus has become commercialized and turned into an excuse for excess, losing sight of what we are truly celebrating. I do not believe that Santa Claus is a problem to be feared, but he is absolutely not a representative of our faith.